And then next, just wanted to kind of talk about quiz grading. So now, those of you who have turned in your quizzes, some of you I have provided some grading and feedback in great depth and detail. Now you kind of have an idea of what to expect on the quizzes each week. For honor students, the quizzes are just a little bit different, but it's the same thing. I just want you guys to let me know if you have any questions. Look at the way I do the feedback and the grading, and I try to be as comprehensive as possible. I try to provide feedback about the grading, not only in the scope of just the assignment itself, but also as we move through the semester to help you grow in your knowledge of sociology. And but yeah, just let me know if you have any questions about that. I want to start by going over the research journal, because we didn't get to do that last week because of the weather. So let me pull this up here. Actually, I'm going to move this over here. Okay. Hang on just a second. And so basically, we would have went over this in class the first time, but we didn't have time. So what I would like to do is, hang on just a second, is just go over this briefly, and hopefully if we make it to class on Wednesday, we will have time to work on this a little bit Wednesday in class. Okay. And again, if anything looks weird, you guys can't see a screen, just let me know. So this is the research journal. And for last week, which we're actually going to have to do it this week, we're going to make a journal entry. And the learning task is to, basically do a 100-word summary about the, exploring economic systems and their societal impacts. This could be from the reading, from my lecture, from something else related to you studying sociology and the economy last week. And then the homework, right, would be reflect on economic issues, personal interest, and current events. This ties to your research project and the quiz. And do a 100-word reflection, right, in relationship to your interests, your career goals, and potential research topic. And so essentially, each week, we're going to fill this out. And like I said, hopefully we meet Wednesday. We can work on this in class. But if not, it would be a good idea to go ahead and do your 100-word summary based on chapter 11. You could probably just look at your quiz and do that. You can even look something up online if you want to. And then, of course, looking at your quiz, go ahead and reflect on your research interest and how they pertain to sociology and what you might want to study. So there's a summary, right? So this is just recapping the information, right? But then there's also reflection. And the reflection is really thinking about what you're doing, thinking about your thinking about what you want to study, and really kind of taking a step back, looking at it. And of course, we didn't get to do this today. I'll have to either reschedule with the library, or I'm going to do just a smaller demo today on the training or on the class. And yeah, so either way, we're going to kind of touch base on this today, but I'm not sure if the library will have a chance to come and do the full demo, but we'll see. See what the future holds. Okay, for the research journal this week, we have a learning task to investigate sociological theories and contemporary issues related to your interests, career goals, and potential research topic. Probably want to do this later in the week because we're going to cover a lot of this stuff this week, and you still have to do the readings and everything for this week. I'm not sure about the in-class activity anymore, but we just kind of go with the flow. So another homework is a 100-word statement, and basically you're just drafting a preliminary research statement. So in quiz 1, you have kind of started to think about, or at least identify a topic you want to study sociologically. In your journal, you've reflected about it. Is this really what you want to do? What does it look like? You maybe tied economics in there, maybe you didn't, maybe it relates, maybe it doesn't. And then for the lesson 2 entry, you should have a better idea of what you want to do, especially after today. We'll search for some articles related to your topic. And essentially, this just builds as a research journal. And this is what you're graded over. Everything in bold will be graded in the rubric, just a 100-word statement, summary, or reflection for each lesson. And this will just build your knowledge, and you will save all of this in a place where you won't lose it because you'll use all of this for your final project. Okay, any questions? Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the library database at NWAC. Get it pulled up here. Actually, oh, right. There's a couple different ways to access the database, and there's a couple different databases. And I'm going to kind of take you through that now. So if you just go to the library website, you can see up here is the URL. They give you a place to search for topics right here. And so, for example, just starting at really basic sociology, maybe your topic is homelessness, right? And so if you want to search for that, it will give you a kind of brief overview of the results. Of course, you want to be signed in so you can access the results fully. And this is just kind of if you want to get kind of used to using an academic database. This is just very general. It's not a specific science or a specific journal. It is just kind of like, oh, well, here's this really huge database. I'm going to, just kind of generally search and see what happens here. Looks like IT might be having some issues, so I'm just going to let that log in. But then you also have A to Z databases, okay? And we have some specifically for sociology and social sciences. And even criminal justice. So you can see we have a criminal justice, if that pertains to one of your interests. And in the A to Z databases, you can get a lot more specific. And you can also see that we have a social science database, which has psychology, social work, and sociology. And then we have a specific sociology database. And it looks like the system finally let me in over here. So we're going back to the general search engine from the main library website page. And as you can see, you can scroll through here and see if there's something that pertains to your research topic and your interest. You can look at the PDF right away. If you click right here right away, then it's going to possibly take you out of the screen. Or here, let's just see if it does it. Yeah, it takes you out of the screen. And this is not a good research practice because then you got to back up, right? You always want to keep your main research screen in front of you. And if you want to open something and look at it, open it in a new tab, and then you can look at it. You can look at the details, the authors, and you can download it or find, sometimes they give you a link. If they don't have the specific PDF, you'll download they'll give you a link to download it. But especially after we've all picked out our research topics and after we turn in Research Journal 1, starting in weeks 3 and 4, you're going to be specifically downloading one peer-reviewed article a week, journal article. And so let me show you what we mean by peer-reviewed. So essentially, within every academic database, you can do an advanced search. So if you look here to the top right, it says advanced search. You click on that, suddenly you have more options. And I think this is based off Boolean logic, and that's why I wanted the library to come, because they know all the specific terminology. But really what it means is you can just do a little bit more specific searches. So you could type, you want this to be about sociology or you can click or, right, or not. Usually you want and because you want this stuff together. And like I said, you could do homelessness and maybe inequality. And again, these are just very broad terms. I expect you guys to have a little bit more specific things. If you want to study something super broad and you're just kind of new to sociology, that's fine. But if you're applying it to your own career interests and goals and stuff like that, I expect it to be a little bit more specific. And with the advanced search, you can check this box for full text, because what's the point of spending all this time looking up a bunch of stuff if you can't download the article? And you want it to be peer reviewed. And we'll talk more about what that means next week in research methods. But essentially what that means is, when I publish a paper, I send it out, it gets blind reviewed by people I don't know. They're experts in the field, and they make judgments, critiques, and they make sure the research is as good as it possibly can, or they'll just outright reject it. Sometimes you just get rejected, and then you have to go to another journal. But it's a rigorous process that makes sure the information you're getting is vetted by the best people in that field in the world. And so this is the type of information we're looking for. Any questions so far? Go ahead and speak up or type in the chat. All right, let's go ahead and look at the sociology database. Do a little bit more specific search. Let's see here. Should be an advanced search button, of course. Let's look at something that I'm studying right now. So generative AI. And we'll see, let's see. Just do something general, like ethics. And again, I didn't check peer review, but I want it to be all peer reviewed. And look over here, you can sort by relevance or date. You can also sort by specific date range. Like, I don't know what people were talking about generative AI in 1997, but that seems a bit weird. I currently, for the book I'm writing, I only want stuff from the past year or so, maybe 2022, since the third version of the Transformer came out at the end of 2022. And again, so you have, this one's how to use AI as a resource, right, in qualitative research. Again, there's a full text link right here. And then you can either, open that in a new window. There's your text. And then what I suggest doing is skimming the abstract first, just to make sure this is something, this tells you all about the study, the method, the findings. It's just a really brief summary. You can read this. If it pertains to, it's a good way to check real quick if this is something that's going to work for what you want. And if it's not, just go back to the drawing board. If it is, you can go ahead and download this here. And just download it to, I think when you're logged in, and then especially when you're on campus, it'll go straight to OneNote. But you want to make sure and download all of this in a folder with your research journal. Just keep it all together for your sociology class. And that way you can kind of build your knowledge and your kind of own little database for your research project as you go. And then if this is something you want to do, that you want to keep, of course, like I said, you can download it. And then you can read it. And you don't have to read, if it's a really technical paper and there's a methods section, which it doesn't look like this one is, generally you want to read, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, especially if the library comes, but you want to look at the theories, right? Because we're going to learn a lot of theory starting this week, and kind of the results and the conclusion. There's a methods section with a bunch of statistics and how they did the study. That's beyond the scope of this class. You don't need to do that unless you want to as an honor student, or unless it's tied specifically toward your final project and you want to go there, but you're not required to do that. And it might be kind of a big investment of your time to try to understand those sections anyways. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Like I said, we have the A to Z databases that get pretty specific. I mean, look at all these databases in here. So you can, you can search this, or you could just start out with the main library website. And, if you just Google NWAC library, it gives you both. It gives you the home website and the A to Z databases, and that can get you started. If we have time at the end of class today, I'll go through maybe a couple of your ideas and we'll look some stuff up to kind of get an idea of the research process. But if not, like I said, hopefully we can do that Wednesday. Okay, let's switch gears. And see what we have left here. Just let me know if there's any questions along the way. Let's talk about lesson 2 this week. And so basically this week, let me pull up our Canvas here. Okay, so as you've seen, we went from just kind of talking about economy and work, just because it's easy to kind of think of and orient yourself, and you kind of are getting an idea of what sociologists study and maybe how they think about things. Now we're going to what's typically the first week in class, and it's talking about sociological theory and theorists. And so we're going to go through basically a presentation on recapping the what sociological theories are, and then look at sociological imagination and scientific thinking and why we study this. I will remind everyone, so these PowerPoints right here, these are the PowerPoints from the book. So you still want to read the chapter, but if you want to look at the information in a different way, these are not required. I provide those as supplemental. And of course, here's quiz 2 and the theory handout, which I'll discuss in a minute. Okay, but first, now we get to the fun stuff, okay? This is the fun, interesting, kind of big picture of like why we're here, literally why we're here, and why we're here in this class, why we're studying sociology, why it's important, and exactly what we're doing. So give me a second to switch screens, and let's start this journey here. There we go. Okay. Okay, so for us to really understand what's going on in social life, we need a quick recap about human evolution in society, okay? And this is really important because, we have to know like why we're here, where we came from, where did societies even come from, right? How did we get all these complex social structures and religion and law and institutions? And, there's a lot going on, and it's evolving very fast. So we're going to look at the evolution of human societies from the cognitive revolution to the present. And if we go back in time, which some of this is still in flux, and as we'll see, social life is really all about stories, right? It's just stories that countries tell people, that we tell ourselves, and we're all part of a story, right? That's what history is. It's a story. Some stuff gets omitted, some stuff we decide what to keep in, we decide what to throw out. But the important thing is all of this interesting stuff started happening during the cognitive revolution about 70,000 years ago. And this is when humans went from just hunting and gathering in tribes to using their brains in different ways to create, abstract symbols like words and letters and attaching meanings to them, right? So then we had the emergence of language and myths, and these allowed people to cooperate in large numbers. And it allowed for the establishment of complex social structures and societies. And then moving on from that, as those complex social structures allowed people to cooperate in more efficient ways, we had the agricultural revolution around 12,000 years ago. Again, this was shift from nomadic life to farming, leading to settled communities and social hierarchies. And the important thing is, and this is why sociology is important, and this is where it all comes from, is that with every technological or social revolution or innovation, it's a double-edged sword. There's a challenge and opportunity. There's a benefit and there's a cost. And for example, in the agricultural revolution, all of a sudden we went from foraging for our food all day long, doing that for 6 hours a day, and then hanging out with our families, to now we've got an overage of food, so much food, in fact, that some communities stopped even breastfeeding their babies and were just feeding them corn. But then people started to get sick, and there were other negative things that happened. And so suddenly they had all this food, but then suddenly they were eating too much of it and they got sick. So again, This is really important, and this is going to give you the intuition for why we study sociology and why it's and why you're here and why there's so many issues with social life today. And so moving on from agriculture to the Industrial Revolution, we had a lot of technological advancements, right? With factories and mechanized and machines that brought people to big cities, right? Urbanization, which created crime, which created the need for a whole new set of laws and social structures. We had the rise of industrial economies and extreme rise in inequality, because suddenly you went from these people who, some of them were probably, rich people that used to have land when there were kings and stuff like that. But then there was a lot of new money too. People would make a business and suddenly they would be a leader in the town and they would have so much money. And of course, if you've got a lot of money, you want to make more money, and it takes money to make money, and you like to keep that money. And that's what's happened since the advent of capitalism, the Industrial Revolution. Has caused a lot of inequality. There's some obviously great things about capitalism as well, but obviously it's a double-edged sword, right? There's really good things, but there's also drawbacks. So now we're going from the information age really fast into the knowledge era, because everything's knowledge. And in fact, we're moving into this AI era, and it's developing so fast. And there's going to be all of these revolutions. It's going to be hard to keep up with. But just kind of to orient you guys, over the past 10 to 15 years, we had a digital revolution, right? Somehow we're more connected than ever. We can see stuff from all around the world, talk to anyone around the world, but then we're also more lonely and depressed than ever, right? Again, so there's like these innovations and these costs and these traps. Globalization, we can move around the world, but there's also environmental impacts. And as we have these big companies, they have a large environmental footprint. And, but the ultimate lesson is that there's an impact on society. Each phase brought innovations and challenges in reshaping human life and social structures. And that's the important reason why we're studying sociology, because every time the culture or the social structures or the economy has an advancement, it leads to all these problems. It leads to the benefits too, but sociologists and criminologists, we study and assess those and critically evaluate that. So if we look at human progress and its impact on society and the environment, for technological advancements, like I was mentioning, industrial and digital revolutions have drastically altered lifestyles and economies and social interactions. So if you think about this, if you were born back in the industrial era, it would be a lot different going to a factory and working every day, or you staying at home, or your father went to the factory, than it would be now when there's like a gig economy, and you don't even have to live in the city. You can just live and work remote. You can still make a lot of money just working in your house, wherever you want to. And so each of those times in history are going to have a different impact on it. And the same for the environment. We have rapid industrialization and urbanization have led to, environmental challenges, resource depletion, and climate change. Societal changes, shifting from hunting and gathering to industrial societies, transformed the structures and roles and norms. Think about family, for example. Think about what you would have been doing and your expectations, what you were supposed to be doing as a male or female, who you were supposed to marry, what kind of knowledge you were supposed to have in a hunting and gathering tribe versus today. It's a lot different. And think about, especially during the agricultural era, when it was largely marriage was economic, and your father was going to marry you to somebody else who had land, and you were going to merge your estates, and it was kind of like a business venture. To now, you can just go out and find love, right? And just do whatever you want, marry whoever you want. For health and lifestyle, changes in diet, physical activity, and lifestyle due to industrialization and urbanization have profound implications on human health. And as we'll talk about in a minute, we actually, you wouldn't think this, but we live in the safest time and point in history. You're more likely to be killed by the bad food we eat than actually by like some crazy person on the street or street crime or something like that. But the point is that all of this stuff has an impact on the groups, like the social structures and social institutions and states and countries and cities. We call that the macro level, right? Just the group level. But it also has impacts on our own lives, right? Because at the individual level or the micro level, we also are in the world, and all of this stuff affects us whether we realize it or not. And in this course, we'll take a look at this stuff. So let's talk about the cognitive revolution real quick. this is what gives us our advantage over other animals. This is what separated us. And in fact, we have separated our own selves from biology because of the complex social structures and cultures that we created with our imaginations have completely outpaced biology. Our genetics have not had time to evolve at pace with our culture. Now our culture evolves about every 10 or 20 years, and it just keeps going and going. It's like running, advanced software on an really old computer, right? They're incompatible. And this will start giving you intuition for like why people are so depressed all the time and why, work sucks. And there's all of these social ills because a lot of this is unnatural. A lot of this we just kind of created and are imposing on ourselves, but our bodies haven't had a chance to catch up, right? But we did this through language, right? Because we had to have language to communicate first. We did this through myths and shared beliefs, right? Because we had to have something that united people that they could believe in so they could all cooperate towards the same goal. And then you have to have these complex social structures, these relationships between different businesses and institutions and organizations. You have to have people within those institutions and organizations, and you have to have them have different jobs, right? Social hierarchies. And then you have cultural evolution, which now we even have businesses around just creating culture, right? So now you know that certain culture is profitable. So not only do you have it naturally evolving, it's also self-directed evolution because we have businesses that are now forcing it to develop because it's profitable. And again, that goes back to our economic systems. Let's talk about hunting and gathering. Again, it used to be nomadic. People used to be in small communities, and it was very egalitarian. And there were, it was a lot of cooperation and shared decision making. Versus now, at a big company or organization, or even if you're just a content creator, you're not having a tight-knit, close bond with the people you're working with. Sometimes you're making stuff for people around the world that you may never even meet, right? It's a little bit different. Talk about agriculture real quick. We domesticated corn, or technically it kind of domesticated us because we're the ones living in houses. But people had all this food in surplus, and so they stopped moving around and they started to have a little bit of health problems and they were eating too much corn. But we did have the rise of social hierarchies too. And this kind of led pre-industrial revolution. This started to lead to inequality as well, because you have people who are owning land and resources and they're amassing it and they have more than other people and they want to keep it, obviously, because they like their land and resources. And again, but there was an impact, right, to move to agricultural society, because it fundamentally changed human relationships and economy and societal organization. So again, we're evolving right now from the information and knowledge era to kind of this AI era. So you can think about what kinds of things are going to happen. All of this stuff impacts our bodies, right? So we have, it's like right now, we don't even grow food anymore. We just go to the store to get food, right? So dietary changes bring significant changes in, or agriculture brought significant changes in diet, right? Increased reliance on grains and domesticated animal products. And it's interesting too, if you look at kind of religion and the evolution of that, we went from worshiping spirits to like worshiping animals, and then went from worshiping animals to worshiping God and then eating animals. And so with every evolution, it caused different forms of culture, different forms of hierarchy. And then obviously there's problems with sedentary lifestyle. Agriculture reduced physical activity, contrasting when people used to go out and hunt. Then health implications. We all know that, right now, one of the leading causes of death, or most of the leading causes of death, are all kind of health related to heart and disease and stuff like that. And long-term effects, the change in diet and activity levels had profound effects on health and societal development. And this is still happening today. Then we had the formation of cities with the growth of urban centers. And we had to have all these new political and geopolitical structures kind of emerge to manage all of this. And it got complex, and we needed organized governance and political systems. So again, our collective imagination is creating all of this imaginary stuff, right? It's imaginary in the sense that it's all ideas, right? But it creates real things. Think about education for a second. Education in and of itself is just a set of ideas, right? It's not the buildings, it's not the books. It provides all of that stuff, it creates it. But in and of itself, education is just a human construct, right? It's a set of ideas that we all give meaning to. And it's a story. Think about the greatest story of all time. Money, right? Can't eat it, can't drink it, just a piece of paper. but we all collectively give it power. We give it value every day when we participate in the system because we all believe in it. And that is the power of human life. But it also comes with cost. And that's a lot of what we study in society. Okay, so in the Industrial Revolution, this is kind of where, so sociology had been around for a while in terms of like philosophy. It was kind of disparate fields of thought. But this is where people like Marx and Weber and everyone started to notice the problems with capitalism. And that's where a lot of this field of thought was spurred. There was an economic shift, right? Transitioning, and there was this inequality. And these theorists started to basically create sociological theories about why things were happening, what was the impact, and that's what we're going to learn about this week. Of course, in modern society, we have globalization, people moving everywhere now. It really pays to be kind of culturally adept, right? Responsive and aware. We're kind of going from the information age quickly to the knowledge era into the AI era. And we have all kinds of stuff happening with the environment that most of us kind of say we care about, but no one really does anything about it. And we'll just kind of have to see what happens with that. For future trajectories, though, we need to be focused on sustainability because our culture is so out of pace with biology, right? Think about like a shark who's had millions of years to like evolve and do all of these things. Like we're completely out of pace with everything. Our social structures have evolved so fast that we're not comfortable and we don't know what we're doing and we're just kind of winging it. And it's fun. There's a lot of great things that come from it, but we also need to be aware in terms of sustainability, technological advancements. A lot of people are really concerned about AI right now. And then, of course, in sociology, we were focused on societal changes and then impacts on different social structures and social institutions, marriage, family, education, so on and so forth. And so, yeah, this was a quick kind of overview of the evolution of human societies from the cognitive, on up to present. And the important thing is that our cultural norms and social kind of organizations, right? All of those things we created with our, imaginary borders or whatever you want to call it, those all are evolving very fast as well, faster than the human bodies are evolving. And then they're exerting impacts, and some of those are good, some of those are bad. And it's a balancing act that we're constantly having to find sustainable ways to adapt to, and that we're also having to adapt to in other ways. Okay, I'm going to open it for questions really quick, comments. All right, no questions or comments. Let's go to something also interesting. And this is really important because this starts to frame exactly like the kind of thinking you have to have for not only, sociology, but just science in general, right? You have to learn a new type of thinking that's for some reason really isn't taught in schools. I'm not sure exactly why, but you do learn it in college, especially in graduate work. If you go and get a graduate degree, I guess because it's complex and stuff like that, it seems like there would be a way to teach people just in a like easier to understand terms. But anyway, something we need to kind of talk about first is kind of philosophical, but it's important in terms of understanding all of the the implications for our social structures and the stories that we're telling ourselves, and really stepping back and looking at social life scientifically. So let's look real quick at what truth is. And if somebody can't hear this or anything, please let me know, but you should be able to hear it on your end.
What is truth? And not the opposite of a lie kind of truth, but the feeling inside of knowing something, that kind of truth. Here's a quick quote from Albert Einstein. If you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. I'll try to follow the suggestion in this quote, and it's very possible that 6 and 7-year-olds and some advanced 5-year-olds may understand this, better than some adults. So, what is truth? Let's say we have a ball. The ball is two colors split down the middle. Half of the ball is orange and half is green. Two people are standing, one on each side. Nobody is allowed to lie and must tell the truth. Remember, it's not a test for verbally spoken truth, but the feeling, knowing, believing kind of truth. The person on the left tells the person on the right, it's an orange ball. The person on the right answers, no, it's a green ball. And they begin to argue about it. This is what the person on the left sees, and this is what the person on the right sees. One person sees an orange ball, the other sees a green ball. What is the truth? Let's bring in a third person. That person is you. Yes, you, the one watching this video. You see two people arguing whether a ball is orange or green when you know it's both colors. You also know that neither person can see the other side of the ball, so you know from their point of view, they're both right. This would be your perspective, or point of view, or truth. Now, a fourth person is standing nearby, knows that there's a yellow light shining on the ball that nobody else sees, making it look orange and green, when in fact, it's a red and blue ball. So what's the truth now? Let's use this multicolored soccer ball to represent many people. And let's say each person can only see one spot or color on the ball. Once again, nobody is allowed to lie and must tell the truth. After everyone finishes saying, it's a yellow ball, it's a blue ball, it's a white ball, and all the other colors, the ones who see yellow start grouping together because they see the same thing. And the ones who see blue start grouping together because they're seeing the same thing. And each group starts thinking the other groups are wrong. So they all begin arguing about who's right. The word truth means a fact or belief that is accepted as true, or something provable or verifiable. Have all the people who see yellow verified and proved the ball to be yellow? Yeah. Have all the people who see blue verified and proved amongst themselves that the ball being blue is indeed a fact? Yes, again. And remember, no one is lying. Let's bring in third person again. You. What do you see? Don't you wish you could just tell them all it's a multicolored ball and that they're all wrong? Or should you see if that fourth person is somewhere nearby with more information than what you already have? Can truth change? Well, if the two people in the beginning were shown that the ball has two colors, one on each side, then wouldn't the truth they believed in the beginning change? And if they met the fourth person who knows about the light, then wouldn't it change again? Truth could be thought of as just a temporary belief of knowing something in a moment of time until it advances and then changes.
Okay, great. So this is important for a lot of reasons. It's important for your kind of own edification as a human being to realize that there's many different levels of truth, and these levels and dimensions of truth have evolved over time. Think about past history, the different explanations of social life and the universe and our existence. We've moved from thinking the planet was at the center of the universe, to the sun, and then expanding on out. We're doing large maps of the universe now. All of those were different versions of the truth, right? They were part of either a higher or lower level of different slices of the truth, but it's really complex and it changes over time. It's also important for sociological theory, because if you get somebody who hasn't had a lot of training in sociology, maybe just like a master's degree, and he's teaching a sociology class, they're going to ask you, like, which theory do you think is correct? And which, they're going to have you kind of pit these theories against each other. But that's not the right way to work, or the right way to think about it, because each of these theories just looks at social life from a different perspective, a different vantage point. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And it doesn't mean that it's exactly 100% true and explains all social life. I will talk about a different theory that better attempts, or it's actually an approach called the systems approach, or social ecological model, that does a better job using multiple theories and perspectives. But for intro sociology, you learn these basic, really old theories. They call them classical theories. I'll teach you two kind of more modern ones. But it's important to understand that they don't explain every facet of human life, and all this stuff in human life is constantly changing, the meanings that we assign to it and our perceptions of it. But the importance is how you learn to think about it You learn how to critically assess things, right? Ask hard questions, and you learn to be skeptical of certain knowledge, especially non-scientific knowledge, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in a minute. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so let's actually talk about sociological theory and knowledge now. Any questions or comments? Get my presentation up here. And so this is also why I saved this or keep this from the first week, because if I cover this stuff the first week, people's eyes are just going to glaze over. You don't have any intuition for like why this stuff exists, how it's going to be useful to you, and it can be really abstract and really complex. But just hang on, I'll try to explain it simply for you. And so first, let's look at the definition and purpose of sociological theories. We have these sociological theories, right, which are frameworks that offer explanations for social phenomena, right, or patterns in relationships. And when you study things mathematically, especially quantitatively with numbers, you can find those patterns and you can predict things and understand them on a deeper level. But these theories guide our research. They help us understand how societies function and evolve. And the purpose is to provide systematic insights, right, on the workings of society, not just like guesses based on non-scientific knowledge. To analyze and predict, right, we want to study social patterns and behaviors. Sometimes studying social patterns and behaviors, as we'll learn about next week, is as complex as studying subatomic particles, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes there are patterns and there are universals that are pretty standard. It's also to understand the impact of various social forces on individuals and communities. That's why I gave you the other human evolution and society lecture, so you can understand that, oh, well, this is important because not only do we need to understand what's going on now, we need to try to avoid as many pitfalls as we can in the future as society advances and evolves. And then another purpose is to guide research and inform policymaking. This is something too that you have to think about. So some sociologists, and this differs in different degrees in different departments around the world, some sociologists think their sole purpose is just to do research and provide data. Some are more active, right? Like activists who want to actually use that data to do something. So you should probably think about, you don't necessarily have to pick a side, but think about, especially for your research project, are you more just wanting to provide data and research for other people to do things with? Or are you wanting to take this knowledge that you found out about how something works in society and apply it to enhance something or fix a social problem, etc. Let's look at the history of sociological thought. And again, that's why I gave you the other lecture, because sociological thought emerged in response to the challenges of modernity, and such as the industrialization and urbanization. And pioneers like Marx, right? He created conflict theory, Durkheim, which he created functionalism, and then Weber, which has a smaller kind of perspective, laid the foundation, focusing on issues like capitalism, social cohesion, and bureaucracy. And the development of sociology has been marked by diverse theoretical approaches to address these different societal, dynamics as things evolve. And again, everyone kind of saw social life from a different angle. The key theorists we're going to talk about are Karl Marx, which focused on class struggles and the impacts of capitalism. Marx's theory emphasized how economic systems shape societal structures. Durkheim these are kind of so Marx was created conflict theory. Emil Durkheim created what's called functionalism, right? Structural functionalism. So these are kind of like opposites almost. Functionalism, or Durkheim explored a social cohesion and the role of institutions in maintaining social stability. Durkheim's work laid the ground for functionalist perspectives in sociology. And so Marx saw all the rich people who had all the money, creating inequality and controlling things to make more money, versus Durkheim focused more on the social institutions and the benefits they provided society and the stability. And so just, again, different way of looking at things. We'll delve more deeply to that in a minute. And then Weber analyzed bureaucracy, religion, and power dynamics. Weber's theories contributed to understanding of individual actions within social contexts. So here are the three theories. Like I said, structural functionalism, which was Durkheim, focuses on how social institutions and structures work together to maintain societal stability and functionality. So in other words, kind of like everything functions for a good cause and equilibrium. We now know that that's kind of naive. Not all social institutions do good things. Some of them do both good and bad things. Some of them have provided very bad things. Conflict theory emphasizes the role of power struggles and inequalities in shaping social structures, often linked to Marx's ideas on class conflict. So again, instead of looking at the social structures who are working to maintain society, Marx in conflict theory looked at the rich people who create those social structures, right, to benefit themselves to create a society. And again, it's just a perspective. It's a viewpoint. It's a vantage point difference. Both structural functionalism and conflict theory are macro level theories. They're only talking about group behavior. We're not talking about effect on individuals' lives. You're not talking about conflict, you fighting with your brother or sisters, anything like that. That is the individual level, which is symbolic interactionism is a micro level theory at the individual level, but you can't extrapolate you can't apply macro theories to micro interactions, and you can't apply micro interactions to macro level interactions. Those are ecological fallacies or atomistic fallacies, and just mathematically you can't do it. We'll talk about that a little bit more next week. But anyways, so those are the two classical macro theories. The classical micro theory, symbolic interactionism, which examines how individuals interact and construct reality through language and symbols. And again, that's been a big thing for us. That's what's allowed humans to separate themselves, not only from other animals, but from our own biology. Okay, so I want to take a minute to point you guys to a resource, because some of you who have never been exposed to this terminology or type of thinking, you guys are like, what is he talking about? It sounds crazy. So I'm going to pull up this theory guide that I have available under lesson 2 in Canvas. And what this does is it maps out all of the tenets for each theory. Let me share this with you. Okay, so again, this is under lesson 2 in Canvas. So here we have the theories we're talking about. So functionalism. Every theory has a tenet, right? And I've outlined the tenets for each theory. So functionalism says that society's institutions, roles, and norms work together to maintain structures and stability. It also says that institutions work in harmony, right, to effectively create a functional society, while those that do not are dysfunctional, right? So there's functional and dysfunctional institutions. Society seeks to maintain equilibrium and will adapt to do so, and shared values and norms are integral to maintaining social order and stability. So you can apply one of these theories to explain a social problem like homelessness, and you would say, well, this theory would say that maybe some institutions are dysfunctional because they're not providing whatever is needed to cure homelessness, right? But you can't really say that our institutions are functional with homelessness, because you're kind of like, well, if they were actually functioning the way they're supposed to, we probably wouldn't have homelessness, right? And so again, there's strengths and weaknesses to a theory. And let's look at conflict theory. It says that the elite and poor compete for resources under capitalism, and that working class people lack the access to resources and opportunities, particularly for women and minorities. There's been conflict, right, between the ruling and working classes, which creates social change. The ruling class creates ideologies to justify their power and wealth, and the working class will eventually develop an awareness of shared oppression and unite to overthrow the ruling class, but that hasn't happened for reasons we can discuss later. And there's symbolic violence, right? Inequality is maintained through subtle forms of violence, such as knowledge, cultural taste, and language use that exclude and marginalize certain groups, right? And so if you look at homelessness from this perspective, you'll see that, well, maybe people who are running the elite, the ruling class, who own the power and the resources and the wealth, maybe they don't want to pay for institutions that help the homeless, right? Because of certain ideologies that exist. Maybe since they're in control of the money, maybe they would rather keep that money for themselves or appropriate it for something else. And then we get into like the cultural values of Western culture. And so if they're not putting that money towards, kind of social support for the homeless and other people, like where are they putting that money, right? So it's a completely different way of thinking about social life. But again, it's a little bit of truth in each one, right? Because of course, there's some people hoarding all the money and doing bad things with it. There's some people doing good things with the money, right? There's also some institutions that are functional, and there's some that are dysfunctional, and there's some that do good and bad things, right? So it's not as easy as black and white, or which theory is better than the other, or which theory explains the theory. But I would print this out and keep it with you throughout the semester, especially as I have the other theories that we're going to cover in the class here. This will make things a lot easier for you to apply. And one thing we can talk about real quick that I mentioned earlier, technically there's all kinds of systems or all kinds of levels to social life, right? Typically we study the macro and the micro. So just large systems. We don't even talk about meso in an intro sociology course because it's a little bit complex. We just think about large systems, nations, legal systems, economies, organizations, communities, political parties, and ethnic groups. This would all be kind of the macro to us at this level of understanding. And then micro, small systems, families, relationships, individuals. And again, this is here for your own edification and study as the course develops. Let's go back to the presentation real quick. Maybe. Okay, so here we go. Emerging perspectives in sociology. So we've talked a little bit about the kind of the classic theories, but I also teach my students a little bit about these more modern theories called social constructionism and postmodernism. And these will probably make a little bit more sense to you, especially knowing like the world we live in right now with all of this information floating around and different versions of truth and reality and the hyperbole in politics and the bipolarization. But social constructionism is a more modern theory that examines how social phenomena develop in social contexts. It posits that many aspects of our social world are created through collective agreements and perceptions. Okay, we'll delve into a little bit more what that means in a minute. Versus postmodernism challenges grand narratives of absolute truths like science, right? We see this in society right now. We have flat earthers and we have people who are disregarding scientific knowledge, emphasizing the fluidity of social reality. And in fact, you can get on whatever website you want and create your own reality these days. And so these two kind of go hand in hand as well. It critiques modernist ideas and focuses on the diverse, fragmented aspects of contemporary society. And fragmented in terms of like we have all of these competing and different versions of reality, especially in politics going around, whatever news channel you watch or social media channel or whatever you're subscribed to, you're going to get different information. You're going to get a different constructed reality, and things may get so convoluted that you start to, lose faith in like mainstream things like science, stuff like that. Or you may just be like me and just kind of unplug from it all because, it's all just a bunch of malarkey. So let's look at some modern applications here for the theories. So if we look at structural functionalism, it's used to analyze how various social institutions contribute to the stability and functionality of societies. It can explain why certain social norms persist and how changes in one part of the society impacts others. Okay, these are just some ways you can apply this. Conflict theory is applied to examine social issues related to power imbalances, economic disparities, and social stratification. It's useful when understanding societal conflicts, class struggles, and issues of inequality. Symbolic interactionism, right, which is on the micro level, offers insights into how individual interactions and interpretations contribute to social phenomena. And so if you're wanting to study more of kind of like the interactions or the social psychological aspect of your hobby, interest, career goal, whatever it is you're studying for your final project, you might want to use this, right? It's effective in analyzing these issues related to identity, perception, and social interactions. Versus social constructionism, and this is very good if you're studying broad and abstract things like media, helps understand how societal norms and values are shaped or shape our perception of reality right? Because like I said, depending on what news source you're tapping into, you're getting a different version of reality. And it's used to analyze issues like gender roles, racial identities, and societal expectations. And again, depending on what media you consume or what family you were brought up in or what social milieu you are from, you're going to have very different identities or very different ideas of what gender roles are supposed to be, what racial identities are, and for societal expectations. For postmodernism, right, it questions the grand narrative and universal truth, right? Making it useful and exploring diverse perspectives and social issues, particularly those related to cultural relativism and individual experiences, which we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Okay, let me see what time it is. Time check. I think we are going to we're going to wait for this for next week. But let's talk about critical thinking real quick. So, like I said, one of the main skills you're going to learn in this, besides the research and organization skills, is critical thinking and sociological thinking. And sociological analysis enhances critical thinking skills by encouraging you to question and analyze societal norms and structures, right? Look at them scientifically, not from your own viewpoint of judgment, but measuring things, doing surveys, quantifying them, removing your judgment and other people's judgment and values from the situation and measuring it scientifically and mathematically. Understanding diverse perspectives and the complexity of social issues. It's going to allow you to evaluate evidence and arguments from various sociological studies, and especially pit those against common knowledge, which is non-scientific. Develop a nuanced understanding of how individual actions impact society, and also vice versa, how this complex world that humans have created through their collective imaginations is impacting us. And this is going to foster a deep, more critical approach to understanding social dynamics and challenges. All right, I know that's a lot, guys, and I know I talk fast. So any questions? Like I said, this is recording, so you can go back and look at this as well if you need to. We've got one more mini lecture, and then I will open it up for questions, comments. Maybe we'll look at the database again for a second, but if we don't have time, we will definitely do that Wednesday. Hopefully we can actually come to school Wednesday. That would be great. Okay, so now, and especially starting next week, we're going to talk about how we do sociology, right? So we have all these abstract ideas and theories and concepts and ways of thinking. We know that we're going to think scientifically about it, but what does that mean? We know we're going to measure things. We're going to introduce math and equations, and but how does that work? And that's what I want to give you guys a little bit more intuition here. To kind of first, let's define what scientific knowledge is, right? Scientific knowledge is empirical. It relies on observational and measurable evidence. It doesn't rely on what Joe Schmo told you at the bar, right? Testable. The claims made can be tested or validated, right? Some things aren't testable or falsifiable. Is there a God? Is there not? That's like a philosophical question. Some things aren't falsifiable. Are humans born good or bad? Not falsifiable, right? Scientific knowledge is systematic. It follows a structured method of investigation. You don't just like, oh, I'm just going to wake up and go talk to people today. Because what if you only go talk to a certain group of people and you're trying to get their perspective on the issue? You're going to get a completely one-sided, inaccurate, invalid perspective on the issue. Cumulative, it builds upon previous research. And so that's what we'll do this semester. You're going to pull together this knowledge and use it for your final project. And it's objective. It strives to eliminate bias and is impartial, right? Versus like trying to prove a point. No, you're just like, either this exists or it doesn't, or this works this way or this doesn't. It's falsifiable, right? Can be proven wrong, right? Some examples: gravity, right? Through repeated experiments and observations, scientists conclude that objects are attracted to each other based on their masses. This can change a little bit over time, but people know that there's something pulling something towards the center of the Earth. They don't necessarily know if it's a wave or if it's, whatever yet. But there's also evolution. Darwin's theory, grounded in extensive research and observation, posits that species change over time through processes like natural selection, and that germs cause diseases, right? Through scientific experimentation, it was found that many diseases are caused by microorganisms, right? So it's not necessarily these theories per se, it's the way you think about social life, right? The way you scientifically study it. Non-scientific knowledge, subjective, often based on personal or collective beliefs or experiences, not universally testable. Claims made may not be easily testable, right? That's why, or what you see in a lot of cults, right? People bringing people into their group, their cult, with lots of very lavish claims, but conveniently, none of those can really be testable, and no one can really know it than the other people making the claims, right? Varied in structure, does not strictly adhere to systematic approaches, may be traditional, just passed down through generations, and we all know what happens when people just talk. Things get miscommunicated. Not always open to some falsifications. Some beliefs are held regardless of contradictory evidence, and that's also going back to our talk about the evolution of human culture and societies. Why it's so important to study human culture, because biology itself enables anything. Like anything can happen with biology, but really it's culture that holds on to things and forbids things. It's our beliefs that tell us that something's right or wrong, and so that can give people a very closed mindset. So examples of non-scientific thinking: religious beliefs, beliefs in deities, afterlife, creation, stories based on faith. Is it testable, right, through scientific methods, right? Could be. I'm not making a claim personally whether it's real or not. I'm just giving you how to think about it. Astrology, the belief that celestial bodies influence human lives and personalities, is not grounded in empirical science. And then personal anecdotes, right? Just because it's happened to you doesn't mean it's happened to everybody else, and doesn't mean everyone else thinks that way. So someone might believe in the healing power of a specific remedy because it worked for them, right? That may have just been lucky, just a one-off chance, or what's happened to you may be completely idiosyncratic, and you may be a very small amount of people that think or have experienced that whatever's happened, but it's not generalizable like to the whole population, right? Okay, so now let's talk about the camera obscura. So this is really important to think about. So one thing that happens in social life is that we grow up, right? And that's also why I do the quick evolution of society lecture. And I'm gonna stop sharing this just for a second, because we're all born onto the planet, right? Spinning around however many thousands of miles an hour, and born into this very small time and space. We don't really know a lot about the past, and what we do have is like just stories that people have chosen to keep or disregard and construct. Future, really don't really know what's going on, and so we have a very limited kind of understanding. And we're just taught things by our families, our community organizations, churches, schools, and all of this stuff, and we are basically presented like with all these versions of reality. But what happens, and as I'm going to share the screen again real quick, close this. What happens is things are, when you study them scientifically, they actually kind of end up being sometimes the opposite of what is common knowledge or what people think is really happening. And one of the best examples of this is crime, right? And so as you can see here, I have just Googled from Pew data, violent crime in the United States. And let's see here. It's one of these here. Okay, and most people don't understand this because there's two different realities happening, right? So look, since 1993, since I was 13 years old, the violent crime rate in the United States has steadily dropped, right, to the lowest. There's a little bump during COVID, obviously, because things got crazy, but people are not being as violent. And in fact, globally, as of 2000, like 14, 15, or 16, we were in the safest time in terms of like violence and conflict and stuff like that on the planet. But you wouldn't know that if you flipped on the news, right? Because the news and media, they thrive on showing the world as a violent place because it piques people's interest, right? People love to live vicariously through violence and through things happening to other people. And it's what moves the needle, and it's what sells, and it's what keeps people engaged. So the media and other people have a vested interest in keeping this version of reality going, when in fact, like what's killing us right now is fast food and heart disease, and the fact that we're putting more emphasis on profit than human health, essentially. And so this is just one of those things. This is the camera obscura. When you actually study things scientifically, you start to realize like, oh, wait, that's what? And then, this just happens like if you go on to study sociology or criminology, it flips your whole world upside down because the reality that you're told about every day in social life, in everyday life, the common knowledge is often completely opposite in reality. Okay, let's move back to the presentation. All right, back to the camera obscura. And so you can see in the little picture here, right? We're all inside here. We're viewing things through the lens of society right here, what people are telling us, constructing us, maybe even what I'm telling you, which I'm honestly not trying to mislead anyone, but who knows? Maybe I'm completely biased and we just don't know. And that's the part of critical thinking, critically assess everything from everyone, even what I say. But so we're in here, we're in this box. We have people showing us this picture on the wall, right? But the box is inverting the picture from what it actually is for various reasons, purposes, and functions, which is the point of studying sociology. Moving on, the sociological imagination. Now, this is important too. This is a little bit different than what we've been talking about. So kind of change your mindset real quick. So this is really just understanding, how the broader social structures and history and things in the world affect your life, right? So this is really just bridging the macro with the micro. You want to understand that you're situated in a certain time, certain place, certain context, and that dictates how you view reality. It dictates your opportunities in life. It dictates how people view you. It dictates how you view other people. And it is basically just exerting an influence on you. And some of them very subtle that you don't understand. And then some of them, are very pronounced, like constantly being bombarded by commercials that are essentially telling you that you don't look good enough, smell good enough, aren't good enough, and you need to buy something to be better, to be good enough, right? Okay, so moving on, we already talked a little bit about a theory and what it's for, right? It's a set of propositions or assumptions. I showed you in the theory handout, we also call them tenets, that propose to describe or explain how certain causal relationships exist on observable or measurable patterns. But what we want to do, especially, we'll talk about this a little bit more with science just generally, this isn't just sociology, we want to establish causal logic. We want to be able to say one thing caused another. And there are spurious relationships, which we'll talk about next week, where one thing looks like it causes another, but it doesn't. They just like go up or they move together, and but they're not really related. And so that's really important. And so we want to know that, A is physically causing B, and then B is physically causing C. And in order for that to happen, A needs to come before B in time, and B needs to come before C in time. And this is just prepping you for next week for research methods when we start thinking about social life scientifically and mathematically. And because you do have to, if C is coming before B, and you have a theory that says B equals C, and then you can't prove that actually happens in time, it's not a valid theory, okay? And so there's just some general kind of ways of learning how to think about social life to establish, theories and what can cause, how something can cause something else. And so this is really important, and we're going to kind of close with this, I think. There's different levels, right? We already talked about macro and micro, but one of the really important things about studying sociology is that the sum of the whole, right, which is in our case group behavior, is greater than its parts. And we are all experiencing different levels of the same truth, kind of like we were talking about in that video. And so I'll talk a little bit more about this in the coming weeks too. When humans interact together, we have these emergent properties that emerge that only belong to the group, that don't belong to the individuals. And sometimes it creates good things, sometimes it creates bad things. But one of the best ways to kind of begin to understand this is a systems perspective, like I mentioned earlier, that doesn't just take one theory and just try to explain social life. It actually looks at multiple levels. And some people call this a social ecological model because we're looking at our ecology. Some people call it a multi-level model, which is what I call it because there's a specific statistical way of modeling it called multi-level modeling. And some people call it a systems approach, but it all means the same things, right? We're these individuals, right? We have biology, psychology, but we're nested in these relationships, family and schools, and then community, broader organizations and structures, and then society, and then it just goes on, right? Global and the culture, and there's all these different things working together across time and space, and none of these are separate. They all interact with each other, right? So it's kind of misleading. And there's also something missing from this, right? Time and space, right? There needs to be an element of how things evolve over time, because the only thing constant in social life is change. Everything is changing all the time. And then space. If you're an individual born in the United States you're going to have all kinds of different relationships, beliefs, and opportunities than if you're a person born in the Middle East or a person born in some other country, right? It's all going to dictate your opportunities, relationships, community, society, everything you're exposed to is going to be completely different. But this is a more holistic way of looking at social life that's not going to confound your knowledge by just focusing on, oh, one theory, does this theory explain this better? It's really kind of misleading to think that way. Okay, so if we look at, here, let me see what time check. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. We can talk about, I already talked about this a little bit anyways. Talk about this next week, maybe on Wednesday. Yeah, I'll just recap some of what we talked about on Wednesday. For now, questions, comments, concerns?
All of that is accessible on like the modules, right? Like the PowerPoints and stuff.
Yeah, I can upload all that for you.
Awesome.
Yeah, and this is going to be recorded, and I will post this link somewhere for the recording as well too. But yeah, I know it's a lot, but we just gotta keep going. So anyone else? Well, I thank you for being here today, and hope you learned something. And if you guys need anything before Wednesday, let me know. Hopefully there is class Wednesday. We can all meet in person and go from there. But I hope you guys have a great Monday and beginning of your week, and I will talk to you later.